How are we doing, guys? Broken Machine here. Welcome to an updated settings guide for Battlefield 2042. Now, all of this is going to cover the Xbox and PlayStation platform. If you're looking for PC settings, I would recommend checking my previous guide linked down in the description below, as the settings for PC pretty much haven't changed. Anyway, sit back, fire up your console, and let's get into this. Invert vertical look is entirely personal preference. If you play inverted, turn these on. Camera shake amount, drop that down to 50. No need for any camera shake unless you really want it. Crossplay, you may as well leave it on. If you're on Xbox, for example, and you turn this off, you can only play with Xbox players. Hints for controls, personal preference. Share usage data, you may as well leave that on. Show player created content, if you don't want to see player created content, turn this off. Allow followers, if you host a server on Battlefield Portal and you don't want people to follow you, turn this off. You may as well leave it on for that though. Display, FOV is the amount of the world around you that you will see. So basically, if you set this quite low, targets become much bigger, but you lose that peripheral vision. If you set it higher, targets at a distance become much harder to see, but you have a huge amount of peripheral vision. Personally, I'd recommend 74. This gives you a horizontal 90 like previous games. Vehicle FOV, personal preference, but I would suggest going all the way up. So when you're in a vehicle in third person, you can see all around you. ADS field of view, off and on, is on screen right now. I like the little zoom, or the lack of zoom here. I used to prefer the bigger zoom, but personally, after many years of playing FPS games, I think this works better for me. Again, personal preference, but do give it a go with the on setting here. Brightness, leave this at 50, turn off the motion blur here, and turn off all of these options at the bottom. For the HUD general, show HUD, turn off or on, up to you. I would leave it to on. HUD motion, personally I would recommend turning this off. Camera shake amount, 50 again, soldier compass, and these options here are personal preference, but you may as well leave them on. There are some colorblind settings here if you are colorblind. The kill log here is the kill feed. I'd recommend leaving this on and setting it to all so you can see what kind of kills are going on around you. Now, crosshair settings are really important. I would leave the opacity at 100. If you want your crosshair to blend in a little bit, turn this down. Crosshair projection, you may as well turn this off. Basically, when on, the crosshair is projected and can lessen the feeling of motion sickness caused by certain camera motions, keeping the crosshair focused on where the player is aiming at in the world. If you turn this off, the crosshair is static and always aligned with the center of the screen. Personally, I would recommend leaving this off. Crosshair thickness is personal preference, and you can see the multiple choices on the right there. Now, for the crosshair color, I would actually recommend something like a pinky kind of purple. That's what I like. You could go for a bright green, maybe a red or a blue, maybe even just go for the default white. Honestly, it is personal preference. Luckily, in BF 2042, there are some images on screen here. You can see the effects the crosshair color has. Do what works for you, but definitely give this one a go. Its indicator opacity is personal preference. I would leave this at 100. Now for the color scheme here, I've actually got the hit color set to blue, headshot color red, and kill color green. So basically, I've got it set up so that when I get a hit, it's blue, so I know it's just a hit. If I hit a headshot, it turns red, so I know instantly that I've done more damage, so I could just go for a body shot. And lastly, the kill color is set to green, so as soon as I get a kill, I know to snap to another target because it shows up as green. Definitely recommend you use that system as well. Now the armor hit indicator color, I'd leave this on yellow. For the minimap settings here, they are once again personal preference. Honestly, I think default is just fine. Now for the audio, I'd highly recommend you turn down the music just a little bit. I like just a little in the background, so 30, maybe even 20 is good for me. If you don't want any music, turn this all the way down. The rest of these, again, I would just leave them as default. Now for the sound configuration here, there are various options. I'd actually recommend leaving the top one on auto. The second one, again, is really personal preference here. I use Astro headsets, so I've got this set to Astro and it's working pretty well for me. I'd also recommend 3D headphones, and if you want a crazy audio experience, definitely try War Tapes. The atmosphere of that is just incredible. The hit indicator is only on BF 2042 here. There was, I believe, BF1 in the beta, so we may see other options here in the future. In-world radio music, personal preference, again, up to you. You can turn on subtitles here if you need them. And next, we're going to go on to the controller settings. Personally, I would recommend having a play of these here. I use default and alternate, so basically circle becomes melee and the right analog becomes crouch. That for me is just absolutely perfect. Now again, I don't want to give too much advice here on the control schemes. There are many ones here, and I'd recommend trying default and alternate for most of these. However, I would recommend jumping into a game, into an empty server if you want through Battlefield Portal, jumping into a vehicle straight from the spawn and just seeing if the controls work for you. Honestly, for the ground vehicles, they are not that different. They're quite easy to get used to, but for the helis and the planes, definitely recommend try joining an empty server and giving those controls a go. Invert vertical look for soldier, personal preference. I would recommend turning off controller vibration. It does affect your aim and I don't think you need that on. Soldier aim sensitivity, I'd recommend 30 to 50 for a new player. I personally use 100. Would not recommend that at all unless you're used to it. Do not use a sensitivity that a streamer or creator uses just because they use it. Use what works for you. Vertical look, personal preference, FOV, same as before. Soldier aim assist, now this is the slow down aim assist. So if you're on target, it's going to slow down your aim. I would recommend leaving this on 100. I personally don't have any zoom snap aim assist, but this is personal preference. If you're a new player, I'd recommend leaving this on 100. Personally, I don't like the snappy aim, so I turn this off. All of these options here are pretty much personal preference. Use what works for you. For the soldier zoom aim sensitivity, this is your aim down sight sensitivity. If you want your hipfire and ADS sensitivity to feel the same, leave this on 100. If you want this to be like the older Call of Duties, where the aim down sight is half your hipfire, drop this down to 50. Again, personal preference down here for most of these options. On the aiming left-right acceleration, I would recommend dropping this to 0. This controls the amount of acceleration you get when pushing the analogs. If you want more one-to-one aim, you want this on 0. If you play a lot of Call of Duty, you may want to leave this on default and just have a play with it. I know in cards there is some acceleration. Now, these vertical aim ratios, right now I'm leaving these on 48, the default, and having a play with them, but if you want to have a go, I would recommend trying this on default first, and if you're not sure about your aim, try putting these both down to 100. That would mean your aim going horizontal and vertical would be the same. If you don't want that, leave them on default for now. You can have a play of yourself, but be careful, your aim can go all over the place if you get it wrong. Uniform soldier aiming, basically if you have this on, when you're aiming down sight with iron sights and then turn 90 degrees and then do the same with a sniper scope, both of these sensitivities will feel the same. So if you want all the sensitivities to kind of feel the same at different ranges, different scopes, turn this on and leave the coefficient at the default and all of these on the default settings as well. Vehicle aim sensitivity, I'd recommend 50, obviously personal preference. I wouldn't go too high and you definitely don't want it too low. Vertical look, personal preference again, FOV, same as before. Tank sensitivities and all these here, I would leave on default, but again, in vehicles, the aiming accuracy isn't super important. It is quite easy to do, so if you want to have a play of these yourself, do go ahead. Vehicle zooms, personal preference again, and all of these are pretty much personal preference. You got some sensitivities here for the vehicles. Again, turn off acceleration if you like that. And there is some vertical aim ratios here again, same as the infantry. Just use what you used before. Now this bottom option here, you want to turn this off if I'm correct at posting this video. Basically, if you turn it on, your vehicle will only go in the direction your camera is facing, and that can be quite confusing. Controller tuning, turn off vibration, center dead zone. Basically, this is how sensitive your controller is to input. I would leave this on default. It should be fine. 13 works for me, but I'm probably gonna lower that just a little bit more. If you find your aiming is drifting all over the place, 1, you might have a bad controller, or 2, you simply got your dead zone too low. I would leave the actual dead zone and the max input threshold on default values unless you know what you're doing. If you mess these up, your aim will be all over the place and it will be so difficult to control. The bottom L2 and R2 buttons here, you want to drop these all the way down so you're aiming down sight and firing your weapons is instant. Next, on accessibility options here, again, these are all personal preference. Colorblind options here, menu narration, use these as you wish. Definitely recommend turning down the camera shake amount. Crosshair projection, we talked about that before, and all of these pretty much before. Again, personal preference. Subtitles here if you need, and some extra controls here. I believe we've already covered those. Now, the controller mapping options here, if you want a fully customized control scheme, you can set this here. If you do want to change any of these, make sure you go to the controller tab and set custom on the controller options. Lastly, we have the help options here. You can scan this QR code, search Battlefield 2042 on EA Help. And that is all the settings pretty much. There is one option here that is for PlayStation users, but you can also do this on Xbox. So if you go to accessibility, then controllers and custom button assignments, you can actually flip the triggers on the top of the controller there. Xbox has something very similar. I believe you might have to use the Elite controller to do this. I may be incorrect on that, but yeah, that is pretty much all my testings there. I hope you've enjoyed this guide, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be sure to post some tutorials very soon. Take it easy, guys. Catch you later.